Okay, so chapter 4 begins on page 90, and there's a PowerPoint that goes along with that as well, talking about identity and intercultural communication and how those are connected. How history and identity, chapters 3 and 4, really connect hand in hand. How you, who you are comes from your history, as well as how you see yourself and that kind of thing, and how you communicate that to other people, and how people should communicate with others in consideration of that. So what's the definition of identity? Identity as determined by your text says our self-concept, who we are, or who we think we are as a person. I'm going to ask this question and let this be a continual thought for all of this chapter, for this whole lecture. Is our identity who we think we are as a person? Let me say it this way. Is my identity who I think I am as a person, or who you think I am as a person? Who determines my identity? Me, or how other people see me, and what you see that? The text originally says our own self-concept, so we'll kind of break that down a little bit. There are 6 characteristics of identity. Of course, there are 6 characteristics of everything in this text. So we're going to walk through those quickly and just kind of show, okay, how do we sort of redefine or continually define identity? The first one is that identities are created and revealed through communication. Communication is really crucial to the process of self-identification. Do people see you the way that you see yourself? Is it necessary for that to happen if you want to have proper communication? It's funny. Have you ever seen yourself on video, or and you hear your voice and you're like, I didn't know I sounded like that, or and you can forget what you look like, right? Like if for a girl, for example, if you're dressed up and you're wearing makeup, or you have your hair fixed and you're wearing makeup, you can see that obviously, and it looks different than if you don't. But if it's just you and you don't see any reflection of yourself, at some point you just start forgetting and you just feel comfortable and normal, right? So it's like, do you have to see yourself for other people to see you that way? What is more, if I think I'm attractive, am I? Or does that determine, who I'm asking, right? Do you think I'm attractive? Do you think I'm attractive? Do you think, how does that go in? And so the identity is communicated in communication also through roles, like what roles people play. So I communicate what kind of teacher I am to you based on how I communicate with you. After having conversations or after certain interactions with me as a teacher or any other teacher, you get a feeling for what kind of teacher, what kind of role I may play. Am I relaxed? Am I casual? Am I strict? Am I authoritarian? Am I permissive? That kind of thing. Same way with parents. The funny thing to really use an example of this would be like with a dog, like training an animal. You have to communicate that you're the boss. Like, I'm the alpha, you're the dog, and so in all training aspects you can never let the dog have any type of power. And I know that's kind of a random example, but I have to communicate that if I want him to know that, right? Like if I want the dog to know I'm the boss, I have to communicate that I'm the boss. I have to act like the boss. I have to be the boss. I can't just say I'm the boss, and then expect the dog to learn. So that communication is important on both ends. The second one is that identities are created in spurts, not a smooth, orderly process. That can seem a little confusing because there is this idea that we grow every day. Like, I hope that I'm maturing every day. I'm becoming the person I'm supposed to be. That's true. We're growing every day. But our identity is being developed in spurts based on your life story, based on your history, your own timeline. So when I was a kid, or when I was a preteen, my parents got divorced, and that put a new identity on me, right? A child of divorce. When I became a Christian 4 years later, that put a new identity marker on me. When I became a college student, that put an identity marker on me, and I became something. When I got married, and I became a wife. When I had kids and I became a mom. Like, those things didn't happen day by day. They were just embedded in my timeline, right? And they all impacted who I am and what role I play in my life and in other people's lives. And so it takes the big picture to see your place in the world and where your identity is. But it happens a little at a time in random moments. It doesn't even have to be an event like marriage and wedding. It could be just something that occurred to you in your life, an event that happened, a trip you went on, something like that that just changed who you are a little bit. The third one is that identities are multiple. I do not mean like multiple personality disorder, things like that. What I mean is we play different roles. If I continue with the example that I'm using, or that I used last, some identities of mine are teacher, wife, mother, right? And I don't talk to you like I talk to my husband. I don't talk to you like I talk to my kids. I don't talk to my husband like I talk to my kids. Some women do. I don't encourage it. But you know, like there are different roles that I play. If I am representing Mississippi College somewhere, I have a different persona, I'm wearing different clothes, I'm, you know, speaking in a specific manner, I'm trying to be in a professional identity, right? Versus, I'm gonna go home and paint my house, right? That identity, I'm listening to music, I've got on chump clothes, you know, and I'm just hanging out doing my thing. That identity looks very different than that. I don't mean personality, like I don't want anybody to feel like we change who we are, but you definitely change how you communicate with people, right? You definitely change your actions or your social context idea brings out different identities in you. The fourth one is that identities are influenced by society. Okay, history, economics, politics all have an influence on our identities. Originally, we're very pigeonholed into our identity, those categories that we've talked about before we're even born. We can't ignore the racial or socioeconomic positions which we start our identity, but other things kind of continue to influence it. People who come into our lives. Someone who, in high school, your parents hosted an international student. That opened your eyes to something totally different. That was an experience that sort of changed you a little bit, but that influence sort of helped create a new part of your identity. Pop culture also determines this as much as you don't want it to or want it to. We're influenced by the things that we wear, the language we use, like what language is popular now, slang and that kind of things, or idioms. That's kind of where we're influenced in other ways. The fifth one is that identities are dynamic, always changing. We've used this example probably in the last 3 chapters, but the identity of a woman in America changing, and we talked about how, in the frontier days, she was just this hard worker, stayed in the home, helped around the house, helped on the farm kind of thing, gets put into factories during the World Wars to take the place of the men, back in the home in the 50s having lots of babies with the baby boom, fighting for the right to work and the right to vote during the women's movement, becoming corporate, and then now this shift back into the home, right? This changing, we're always changing what it means to be a woman. Arabs after 9/11, Arab Americans specifically, their identity, their tag for what they were known for or what some of that would look like. Even identity labels. African Americans have had the most politically correct label change throughout time. It went from, and these were the politically correct terms for African Americans, colored to Negro to black to Afro American to African American. Although most African Americans that I know prefer or are very comfortable with still being just called black. But there are labels that kind of change and go through that. And the sixth one is that they're developed in different ways in different cultures. Okay, so we used the example before about America wants you to be independent, right? And other places would want you to be interdependent. America wants you to find yourself, be an individual. But other cultures, African cultures, Asian cultures, they emphasize this interdependency on people and family members. They emphasize, and so how they show that, right, and how they encourage that. The parents are teaching you that from the beginning. So the way that you develop your identity absolutely is affected and connected to the cultural behaviors around you and the cultural behaviors that you're expected to be, right? So those are the very fast characteristics of identity. There are some social and cultural identities. This is going to sound very similar to the list in the last chapter about different types of histories, and which is exactly how this kind of comes in, right? This is, again, how they're really connected. Social identities, cultural identities. Gender is the first one. You know, pink or blue, right? If you're painting a little boy's room and you can pick pink or blue, which one should you pick? Blue, right? What does it mean to be a man or a woman? How men should act? What they should look like, even, these identification markers, right? It's more appropriate for a man or a woman to be very hairy, or more acceptable, right? A man, right? It's not as, it's more acceptable for a male to be overweight in American society than a female to be overweight. Or it's more, you know, normal-ish. In other cultures, they find females that are very thin to not be attractive, right? So that's a cultural identity development as well. Other cultures are different than those standards, and gender identities tell us what it means to be masculine or feminine, right? Any woman who exhibits too many masculine tendencies gets stereotyped as either homosexual or gets stereotyped and prejudice terms used, derogatory terms used, like she's butch, right? So these are terms that come about because they're breaking the gender identity, right? And they're tagged as something based on what we say they should be. Not to be confused with gender identity is the sexual identity. And this is a lot more complex. It does go into your sexual preferences. What does it mean to be gay? America and in English, we have a lot of terms to help you figure out exactly what your sexuality is. We say gay, homosexual, heterosexual, lesbian, bisexual, metrosexual. I mean, we have so many of these sexual terms. We really want to pinpoint some. We want to tag someone. We want to be able to say, this is what you are. We want to label people sexually. So we have that goes in with it, but we also be aware that other places don't have those kind of categories. They're typically either attracted to the same sex or the opposite sex, you know, and that's kind of how they go about it. But it's funny because for America to be very prudish, right, like real strict about sexual identity, real not very free and open. We want you to be in a category. We've gotten a lot of flack over the years about how we interpret sexuality or public displays of affection elsewhere. We're pretty prudish on the terms of PDA, right? Other cultures and other countries are very much more affectionate in public. In Peru, it was crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, everybody here needs to get a room, you know? And we're very prudish, even when it comes to TV. We do have rated R things. We do have some. We do have a porn industry, that kind of thing. But for general television, we're a lot less open to nudity and things like that than other cultures or other movies that are based in other European countries and things like that. However, to be that prude, we have gotten a lot of flack from other cultures and other countries about our disregard for keeping sexuality private, I guess. And the main example is Bill Clinton, when he went through the whole scandal in the late 90s with Monica Lewinsky. It was this whole thing, and other countries and cultures were just flabbergasted that here we are and we are willing to talk about the President of the United States' sexual activity. Like, they found that to be so, you know, we won't show nudity and direct sex on a movie that comes on just regular TV, but we're willing to talk about the highest public figures' sexual acts. You know, so there's this. So we do have sort of this weird double standard. We're really in a funny place when it comes to sexual identity as Americans. The third one is age. How old is old, right? How old is someone when you say they're old, or I can't wait to be old, and how people should behave at certain ages, right? So that woman is 60 years old. She does not need to be wearing the itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini. You know, like there are certain things that we say you should not behave that way. You know, can a 50-year-old date a 20-year-old? Well, most would say no, that's weird. But going back to the gender identity, it's more weird for which gender to be older. Is it more acceptable for the man to be 50 dating a 20-year-old, or the woman to be 50 dating a 20-year-old guy? Now we have cougars, you know, thanks to Courtney Cox in the TV show or whatever. but yeah, I mean, we accept more for the man to be older, and that's this age identity. We also have this, ask yourself this, we also have these questions of like what I should be doing at this age. So like, I want to be married by the time I'm 30. I want to have kids by the time I'm 30. I want to be a doctor by the time I'm 35. Like whatever they are, we have in our head these age associations with certain activities in our culture. People who graduate college older than 23 or 24, like for an undergrad, seem to be a little bit more strange. Like it's a little odd to have someone, they're kind of out of their age identity. They're out of what they should be. We actually in America have an Age Discrimination Act that protects people who are over 40 from employment discrimination. In other countries, the older, the more they're sought after. So they're not looking for the young new people coming out. They're looking for the people with experience. So in America, we do not value the elderly the way many other cultures and countries do. We value young and spry and technologically advanced and that kind of thing. So age has a lot of factors in it. The fourth one we've talked about a whole lot, racial and ethnic. People feel uncomfortable discussing racial issues, and some people find it meaning. What identity it gives you is determined by the context and by the person. How important is your ethnic identity to yourself? Ethnic identity is a self-identification, okay? How well you associate with your culture, or the traditions, or the customs, or the values and behaviors and feelings of belonging to a specific group. A lot of people find value in their race or in their ethnicity, or they find insecurity in that. And there are different ways that can kind of go about that, if that's a real important aspect of your culture or not. 5, physical ability. We all have varying degrees of physical capabilities, right? I mean, I can't go out and run 5 miles. Some of you can. We're all, in some way, some would argue, we're all disabled to do something by some form, by our height or weight or gender or age. 15% of the United States population has one or more physical disabilities. People want to be accepted exactly how they are. A lot of times it takes a lot of effort to accept themselves exactly how they are. And so these people take on a new identity, or people who are born with specific identities, physical disabilities, have an identity in that, and they've always learned how to deal with that. But if someone, for example, loses a leg or an arm when they're 30 years old, that can create a true identity crisis, right? Because now you have to re-establish yourself in a new identity based on your new physical disability. 6, religious. This is an important dimension of identity. Some of you would actually say that your religious identity, your belief system, defines all of this other stuff. So whatever my religion says is what I believe about gender. What my religion says tells me what I believe about sexuality. What my religion says tells me what to think about age or racial. Does that make sense? So for some people, the buck stops here. This is where it is. But this is a real source of international conflict or intercultural conflict when your identity based on your religion conflicts with someone else's. And most people, find great comfort in that idea. But words like Jewish, is that a religious term or is that an ethnic term? right? And then how do where did the role of separation of church and state come into play with identity there? The seventh one is class. We like to think of ourselves as not having a class, but if we didn't have socioeconomic class in the United States, we wouldn't have words like trailer trash, right, or white trash, or ghetto. Your book talks about rich people food, and it lists a couple of things. I usually ask, what are some, and everybody kind of says caviar, that kind of idea. But your book mentions brie cheese. Asparagus, I thought that was an interesting thing, but I mean, that stuff's pretty expensive, so it makes sense. Lamb. Another thing that comes into play with class that you can tell based on identity is your language choice, how people speak in different class associations. And most people can't really remove themselves from the category they find themselves in. But certain people have learned to change their language so that they seem more or less classy, for lack of a better term, in other situations, right? So, and I can do that. My family is from Redneck, Mississippi, and I can turn on the redneck and my grammar goes south, and I can do that. And then I can speak proper and write proper English as well. The fact is that the U.S. has the most unequally distributed wealth and income in the world. And very few people in the U.S. actually get to change their status throughout their lifetime. Typically, people stay in the economic system economic status that they were born into. The eighth one is national. This is about your legal status in relationship to a nation. So what does it mean to be American? There's some positive things about Americans, some negative things about Americans, and we could list those. A lot of times when I list these in class, my students can name a lot of bad things about American. Tell me something about American. We're greedy. We're obese. We're selfish. We think everything's about us. We're broke, like we're in a bad financial situation. We can't get along with each other in our government. And so we've got all this stuff. When I say tell me some positive things, well, we're free. We have freedom. We have good education systems, we have good health care, that kind of thing. Well, thinking about what that means to be an American or whatever nationality you are, why is it important to have some sort of connection to a national identity? Why is it important to say? I mean, even if you can list 10,000 things that are wrong with being an American, most people would not choose to change that, right? So you can complain about it, but don't take it away. It's like, don't talk about my mom, but I can talk about my mom, but you can't talk about my mom. It's because we end up having national pride. It brings people together. It brings us together as larger than ourselves. The ninth one is regional, similar to national, but it's this idea of Southerners, right? We have this Southern pride, Southern hospitality. This is a Southern thing, a Southern accent. Yes, ma'am. New Yorkers have this bond. Anytime a crisis occurs in a region, there tends to be a bond. So after Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, all of the Gulf Coast tourism boards are really kind of connected. So there's a bond there. Boston, after the Boston Marathon, there's this Boston Strong theme, right? So there's a regional. What does this influence? It influences a lot of things. It does influence your accent in the way you speak, right? So we have Southern accent. Your manners and what you consider to be proper. Holding the door open for a lady is completely acceptable in the South, and saying hi to random people on the street as you're passing them just because you accidentally made eye contact, totally acceptable in the South. Not necessarily acceptable on the streets of New York or New Jersey, right? So regional identity has a lot to do with your manners and how you behave in that way. And people tend to be very proud of it. If anyone's from Texas, there's just this thing about Texas with me. They are so proud. They're just this, everything's bigger in Texas, everything's better in Texas. Texans love Texas. So there's really a strong, I've never seen a regional identity as strong as a Texan pride. Just ask any Texan. They are not ashamed to tell you. Then the 10th one is a personal one. This is tied to that notion of yourself. how you behave and communicate to others help you kind of construct your own personal identity. To answer the question from the beginning of this chapter, or the beginning of this chapter is, we are who we think we are. However, we are who others think we are too. This back and forth thing happens with identity. So I think I'm important, right? And necessary to this operation in this company. I have the responsibility to communicate to my boss and to my coworkers, look, you need me, I'm important, and I communicate that to them. However, they also can communicate to me, you're not needed here, right? So that can go both ways. Something that's really interesting in identity development, the text, we're going to kind of stop after this one, but the book goes on to talk about identity development further, and how minorities and majorities and multicultural people identify themselves and grow into that. But something's really interesting is in identity development, initial identity development as a children, we tend to take on whatever identity people tell us we are. We have some characteristics, some thing, and I'll be honest, I'll give a first example for myself. So I'm the firstborn girl, and I have a very strong personality. I've always had a strong personality. I've always been an emotional person, even as a kid. Well, people start feeding into that. Oh, well, that's Ashley. She's bossy. Oh, that's Ashley. She needs all the attention. Oh, let's look at Ashley. She needs all the attention. Oh, leave it to Ashley. She's going to make sure that she gets her way, right? So these things I hear, even as a really young child, I start to pick up on. Two things happen. One, I start to believe it. I must be bossy. Two, I start to act it out. Well, if I'm bossy, then I'm going to be bossy, you know? So, oh, well, if I like attention, then I'm going to get all the attention. And so it fuels that fire as well, but it also starts to teaches you what you think you are all of a sudden. Well, if everybody thinks I'm, an attention seeker, then I must really seek attention. Kind of that center of attention annoying person. Hopefully in life, kids can learn to use those for positive or negatives, right? But, so my son, my oldest son is just like me, okay? He's bossy. He likes to be the center of attention. He is really intense, right? And he wants to have it his way. I've learned it's very important how I portray that to him, Oh, Isaac, I see that, you'd like me to sit here and watch you play this. Let's play this. But I don't say negative, derogatory things about it because I know how that can feed into. Otherwise, I can say, oh, you have such a strong opinion. You really know what you think should be best. Why don't you tell me your opinion and then we'll look at all of them. Like, rather than just, oh, well, let's, he's going to pitch a fit or throw a tantrum. You have to be really careful. I had a student once tell me, whenever I opened this up for conversation in class, she said, I thought I was shy until I came to college. Because she was the middle or the third child. And in high school, and her parents, they always just said, oh, that's Barbara. I'll just make up a name. That's Barbara. She's shy. She doesn't talk much. And she didn't. She said, I didn't talk much. So I just always was like, oh, I'm shy. Came to college, went through Rush, and realized I'm not shy at all. Like, I never saw the need or had the opportunity to speak up as much, and nobody expected me to speak up, so I just didn't. She's obviously not the center of attention person, but she doesn't find herself to be shy or intimidated by that either. So, but she believed she was until she was able to get out of that environment and see that she was something else. So there's that real interesting dynamic of, and there are some people, like, you can choose to change how you want the world to see you as well, how you can communicate that. Does anybody watch Survivor? Okay, so Survivor just ended, so I don't know how late this video will be or how out of date, but it's the one where fans versus favorite, and this guy named Cochran won the $1 million. This is his second time to play the game. This guy is like major dork, okay? Pale, white, redheaded, small, scrawny, like Harvard Law, like, I mean, we're talking like kind of like the white Steve Urkel, like dork. Do you know Steve Urkel is from Him?
Yeah.
Okay. So he plays the first time he played, but he was like a Survivor genius. Like, he even like wrote papers on Survivor. Like, he's like in Harvard Law, and he'd studied it for like 13 years, like 12 or 13 years, like watched every episode, this kind of thing. So it was always his dream to be on Survivor. So he played this first time a couple of years ago, gets out there, I mean, gets sunburned immediately. He's beat red. He's just, I don't know, like, and everybody just kind of picked on him, and he was real insecure, and he was real nervous. He didn't want to take off his shirt. Like, I mean, even wearing the bathing suits, he just kind of was like, I'm not taking off my shirt, don't get sunburned. Just real timid, but real smart. Like, he knew how to play the game, but he got voted out. He got the opportunity to play again. He comes back, and this last season, he's like this confident, almost cocky person, still looks the same. It's not like he like went out and gained a lot of weight and became a whole lot more attractive or anything like that. Same guy, and he talks about it in some of his interviews, how this cockiness, this confidence thing is really an act. Like, he is being overly cocky, right? He even says, like, his mom, they say, what did your mom think about you coming out acting all cocky? And he says something like, well, she knows that that's the biggest act. Like, she knows that I could not be pretending and faking it any more than I am. He even says at one point, like, it's silly stuff, like, question was asked to him, like, after this, how has this game changed you? Are you going to go out to the bar with the guys, the bros now? You're going to be the cool kid now, is what they were asking. And he was like, yeah, maybe, but, I mean, I won't be sitting right next to you because I'll have a girl on each side. Like, he's got, like, these real funny caricature things. However, so he comes back just saying, I'm gonna act. I'm gonna pretend to be this, like, really cocky guy. He ends up winning, like, so many of the challenges, physical challenges, right? Like, so he ends up winning them. He wins the $1 million. And it shows how much his throwing off his personality, like him saying, this is how I want you to perceive me. I'm going to pretend, and I'm going to, like, say, this is my new identity. How much further that takes him in a game where that's required. It's interesting because that's all that really changed, and he'll say that. All that really changed was my confidence level, or my ability to make you think I was more confident. And it won him $1 million this time, right? He's still as sunburned as ever, right? He says he has translucent skin. So, people can do that. Like, people can go to college and just say, I don't want to be this person anymore. I want to be this person. And they just completely change that social identity of themselves. So we have that ability to decide and portray. But remember, communication is receiver-oriented, right? So if I decide I am going to be this, I don't know, whatever the word is, whatever fill in the blank. This is the person I'm going to be now. This is the personality I'm going to take on. You can be that. You can start to try to live your life out that way and pretend to be that way. However, if the people you're portraying that to don't read it the right way, if they don't take you the way you're trying to be, then it doesn't come across that way. That makes sense? Then it may come across as just fake. It may come across as not real. So because communication is receiver-oriented, that identity portrayal goes both ways. Your identity is how you see yourself, but it is also how other people see you and how those two things kind of work together. So your identity, culture, and history all determine how you perceive the world around you as well. So all of that kind of goes into play for things that are around you. And there are a lot of interesting things to read about in the book going through. It's really fascinating, but we don't have enough time to kind of go through it all. So that is chapter 4, which ends unit 1. So the first test is through, the only chapters on the first test are through chapters 1 through 4. Okay?